Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
I don't think I need to, but if you needed any further clarification of that observation with which we opened the whole show this morning, about how there's a particularly unpleasant type of individual in the box seat at the moment, a particularly unpleasant type of ideology under which people pretend to care passionately about the victims of child sex abuse when the perpetrators are brown, but don't seem to have anything at all to say when the perpetrators are white. This has just come in from Alabama, okay? Bearing in mind that, you know, a hard-right, Trump-supporting politician, Roy Moore, endorsed by Trump as well, prior to these revelations, stands accused of a sexual encounter, which would, of course, be, to our moral compasses, a crime with a 14-year-old girl decades ago. Guess what? I mean, this is actually unbelievable, but it's probably the best proof yet of the point I've tried to make about how these far-right agitators pretend to care about people being abused, but actually are just using the victims and the abuse victims as weapons with which to attack minorities. An Alabama state official on Thursday dismissed a Washington Post report alleging that the GOP Senate candidate Roy Moore had initiated a sexual encounter with a 14-year-old girl decades ago, saying there was an age gap between the biblical Joseph and Mary. This is astonishing. It's a quote. The Alabama state auditor, Jim Ziegler, told the Washington Examiner, "Take Joseph and Mary. Mary was a teenager and Joseph was an adult carpenter. They became parents of Jesus. There's just nothing immoral or illegal here. Maybe just a little bit unusual." And that's one to cut out and keep. If you feel that grown men making sexual advances on 14-year-old girls is always wrong, then you're like me. If you feel it's only wrong when it's someone you don't like doing it, then I guess you're like them. It's a genuine cut-out and keep moment. 7 minutes after 12 is the time. I'm going to change the course of the programme again now, I think. Are we going to bring Lord Kerr in straight away? I think we probably should, because he's a very busy man and is the author of the Article 50, under which, of course, we find ourselves withdrawing from the European Union. He's delivered a speech this morning under the auspices of Open Britain, and we've effectively sort of handbagged him and dragged him kicking and screaming into the studio where Lord John Kerr joins me now. I'll give you time to assume the position, Lord Kerr, and get the microphone into place. I've used you as something of a totem over the last year, of the people who reject expertise, somehow believing themselves to be better qualified than any of the experts. You found yourself in the incredible position of finding some of our most shrill exponents of Brexit believing they had a better understanding of the Article 50 that you actually wrote. Is that a fair description of circumstances?
Oh, you know me. I have no enemies. I'm just a humble technician, ex-diplomat. Yeah, I wrote the thing, and I think it is important that people should understand what it says and what it doesn't say.
Because there are some prominent politicians in this country, even at cabinet level, who appear to be contradicting what you know to be the actual content of Article 50.
Well, I think the key point that is at issue is when you sent in a letter of the kind that Mrs. May sent in on the 29th of May, saying it is our intention to withdraw, the key point is, can you change that intention? Can you take back that letter? And of course you can. That is a fact. I think that some Brexiteers, I don't mean the government, I mean some Brexiteers out there, would like to maintain that you can't take it back, that it's an irrevocable act, that is all automatic, and we are certainly going to be out of the European Union in March 2019. Well, it's not true. We always have the option, for so long as we're a full member of the club, to change our mind. And we are a full member of the club right now, and we will be right up to the moment when we leave, if we leave.
You said in your speech earlier that, and I quote, as new facts emerge, people are entitled to take a different view. This is a little bit outside your sort of diplomatic remit, but do you have any theories, do you have any understanding of people who are determined not to take a different view, however many new facts emerge? This sort of stubborn rump of Brexit thinking that I can't tell you exactly what it was I voted for, but I'm damn sure going to resist any attempts not to deliver whatever that undefined and possibly misunderstood thing I voted for is.
I'm not an expert on polling
or psychology.
I'm certainly not an expert on psychology. I think that if there were no new facts, then I wouldn't be think it very important that people should have an opportunity to change their mind. But they didn't know how complicated the process of getting out was. They weren't told that. We weren't told about the likely costs of departure. Indeed, the battle bus rather suggested that there might be cash coming this way rather than going that way. And then there are a lot of facts that are emerging which people may want to think about. But James, that's not really me. I'm really simply on the simple, boring technician's fact that the treaty doesn't say you can't change your mind, that you can change your mind if you want to, and Mrs. May could take back the letter if she wanted to, and there would be no price to pay for doing so, and our partners across the Channel would be absolutely delighted if we did.
Did you make reference to Putin and Trump being rather disappointed if that happened?
That's my speculation.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I think there is evidence that the President Putin doesn't particularly welcome the strength of Western Europe. And there was plenty of evidence that President Trump hoped that we would leave and hoped that that would start an avalanche with lots of people leaving. If I was an Eastern European head of government in the EU, I would worry quite a lot about President Putin these days. Looked at Crimea and Ukraine and that breach from the post-war understanding that frontiers were sacrosanct. So I would worry about that. As a West European, I worry about, and a former ambassador in Washington, I worry about a president who has a very transactional approach to alliances and the world multilateral system, and tends to see things as heads I win, tails you lose. It's not as clear that this president believes in cooperation for the common good. He tends to see things as zero-sum games. I think that in that situation, all European heads of government probably feel that it's quite a good idea that we should stick together and work together. That it's a cold world out there, and we're facing Chinese competition, we're facing the common problem of global warming, common problems of terrorism and so on. So I'm thinking there's a general feeling that it's a pity if the British choose to step out from all that cooperation. Of course, people would also say, all across Europe, it's a democratic decision for the British people, and if they decide they want to go, then of course off they go. But all I'm saying is that decision hasn't been finally taken as seen from Brussels, as seen from the treaty. It's not until the period of 2-year negotiating period elapses that is a final decision has to be taken.
So you scrupulously avoid counselling the British public on what they should do. You're just concerned that they may not be fully aware of what they can do.
That's exactly right, James. I mean, I'm trying to stay non-partisan.
Yes.
I'm trying to explain what was in the convention's mind back in 2002 when it wrote this article, and what were in the Prime Minister's minds when they accepted that article and wrote it into the treaty. And none of them thought that writing a notification letter, Mrs. May's letter, the 29th of March, was an irrevocable act, and it isn't, because the treaty doesn't say it is.
There are 4 strands to your intervention today. That's it, in many ways the first. The first is that you can reverse it. Also, the 4th one, once we're out, we're out. Do you think people fully understand this? That if at some point in the future we did want to resume membership of the European Union, there's not a cat in hell's chance that we could do it on terms comparable or similar to the ones that we enjoy at the moment?
Well, we've been in 45 years, and people like me have spent a lot of time over there negotiating for opt-outs, negotiating for rebates, negotiating for a whole lot of special terms, which we currently enjoy. If we left the European Union, and here the Article 50 is completely clear. If you've left the European Union, you can't retain a key and creep in by the back door. You have to go round to the front door, which is the accession procedures, and you're just a candidate country like any other country. And we would be unable to say, for example, to the Lithuanians or the Latvians and so on, who are in per capita terms not as wealthy as we are, we'd be unable to say to them, we'd like to come in, but we're not prepared to pay the full subscription, and you guys are going to have to give us a rebate. We would need them all to agree before we did, and I think that is completely impossible. So there is no price to be paid for staying in now. We could take back the letter, we wouldn't pay any price for it, but once we've left, when we come back in, cat and hell's chance was your phrase. I'm a diplomat, but I actually
I'm very glad to hear it. I wonder whether you'll answer this question. Is it in your mind now possible that we will leave with no deal at all?
Yes, I worry that it is a real possibility.
What would that mean, in your opinion?
That would be a disaster. That would be legal chaos, huge difficulties for companies. Would contracts be valid or not? I think that it's not to be contemplated. And yet, you're right. It could happen. I think that all parties should be trying very hard to avoid it. It would be a disaster particularly for us, but it would be very bad for everybody. Therefore, I hope that the negotiations will start to pick up speed, and I hope that an agreed outcome will be found. But at present, it's not looking very good. It's 505 days, exactly 505 days today, since the referendum, and we have 505 days, exactly 505 days today, to March the 19th.
Yes.
So if the date of March 19th sticks and nothing happens and the British people don't change their mind, we are going to have by then to negotiate an enormous raft of agreements. And frankly, it's very, very difficult to see that job being completed. And if we isn't completed, then there will be quite a damaging degree of chaos.
Theresa May today, probably not filling you with confidence or comfort when she writes in the Daily Telegraph about how we are leaving on the 29th of March 2019. Whatever happens, how does that sort of intervention, A, can you make sense of it, and B, would your former colleagues in the European Union, to which you were the UK's ambassador for 5 years, what do they think is going on in Britain?
I'm trying to be non-partisan.
I know you are, but which is why I'm asking you to tell me what they think. You might not agree with them.
I think people are puzzled about the situation in the British government. I think people are puzzled that we haven't put forward any negotiating papers explaining what is the future relationship we want with the Union. I think people explain their puzzlement by saying that the cabinet is very divided, that there are people who say, perhaps the Chancellor is a key exponent, that we should stay as close as possible to the single market we're apparently going to leave, and the customs union we're apparently going to. We should stay as close as possible in the interest particular of our services exports, which are the 80% of our exports. There are others at the other end of the spectrum, say Mr. Gove or perhaps Mr. Davies, who take a different view and believe that we should be high, wide and handsome on the open seas. We should perhaps take as our model Singapore. We should be going for low tax, low tariff, low welfare. We should be low regulation. We should be a quite different kind of economy. And in the middle, you have some, perhaps Mr. Johnson as an example, who believe we can have our cake and eat it, that we can be non-members of the single market but enjoy all the benefits of single market membership. And I think that, it would be good if the Cabinet could be clearer about which direction we were going, and I don't know if that it is going to come about, but so long as it doesn't come about, it's quite difficult to see how we can kick the talks into life by putting forward a negotiating document setting out our vision. I think the Cabinet have divided visions.
And that you can't embark upon a process of give and take, which is what the negotiations would be, until you've specified what it is you want to give and what it is you're hoping to take.
Exactly right.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how worried are you about the future of the country?
Well, I'm obviously very worried. I mean, I will come clean and admit that I believe it would be a great pity if we left the European Union.
Yes.
But that isn't... I'm trying today...
I appreciate that.
Trying today to be non-partisan and simply set out the facts on what the treaty says, what it doesn't say, to try to weaken the propaganda that it's that we're on a chute out, that we can't get off the chute, that as soon as she signed the letter, that was the Rubicon, we crossed the Rubicon, we're stuck with it. I don't think that is, in fact I know that is not what the treaty says.
Because you wrote it. Or at least you wrote this, I keep reiterating that because I think that you're almost the kind of patron saint of the rejection of expertise. I have heard people trying to argue that they have a better understanding of Article 50 than Lord Kerr does, and Lord Kerr wrote it. But it's almost, I think we're beyond satire in so many ways. But this is a rather pertinent example, isn't it, of the I don't know what the correct phrase is, the absurdity of the zeitgeist, perhaps. I know I've said final question a few times, but I haven't had this privilege before. Do you understand why she signed it so quickly? Why she felt this? Because I think most people are agreed that we probably should have paused on Article 50, not least perhaps in the hope of getting the negotiating position established before triggering the start of the withdrawal. Do you have a view on why she triggered it so quickly? And
I'm guessing that it was something to do with the timing of the European Parliament election in May 2019, that it would be messy if we were still in a negotiating process at the time of the election. Should we be electing members to the next European Parliament? And that seems to me to be an issue which might have loomed rather large in an ex-Home Secretary's mind, because Home Secretaries have to run elections.
I hadn't thought of that.
And it certainly loomed quite large in the European Parliament's mind. I take the view that it would be a very odd reason for which to take a really very dramatic decision, the most important we've taken since 1945.
Yes.
I think that solutions could be found to the problem of whether there should be British MEPs elected to a parliament that they might shortly be leaving or not. These things are all soluble if we were to decide that we wanted to stay in. And it is still open to us to decide.
Lord John Kerr, many thanks indeed. I'd love the opportunity to let my listeners ask you questions on the phone at a later date, if we could possibly, if we could float that boat before you go. Thank you very much for your time today. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. It's 12:24. And what an impressive man, and in the age of the rejection of expertise, what a pleasure to listen to somebody whose expertise is utterly unquestionable. A man drafted Article 50, reminding the British people today that regardless of what the propaganda coming out of certain newspapers may seek to tell them, our Article 50 letter could be withdrawn at any time without cost or difficulty, legal or political. There were 4 strands to Lord Kerr's speech earlier today. The second strand was that a standstill agreement is no panacea. In other words, if there is a transition period, and it appears, I think, with this letter in the Telegraph today, that Theresa May doesn't want one. That's the weirdest thing about that. I was pleased with that interview. Thank you for the kind words, but there are a couple of questions I forgot to ask him. We are leaving the European Union on the 29th of March 2019. Presumably she's not saying, regardless of whether we've got a transition deal or not. Well, maybe she is, but she's not rejecting the idea of a transition deal, is she? Because if the other 27 countries agree to a slight extension, which they would do, because they're desperate to do some damage limitation for their own situation. They're motivated by their own members, not really by our situation. But that involves just an extension of the negotiating process. It doesn't make the outcome less or more likely. The third strand was that once out, there is no easy way back in, and there would be a price to pay. For example, single currency in Schengen would be very hard to avoid if we wanted to get back in at some later point, and the rebates that Margaret Thatcher negotiated would probably not be on the table if we found ourselves returning to the door and knocking at some point decades hence. And finally, while we're still in, the option of stopping the clock in order to consult the people again is available. Another point that I forgot to pick him up on. Partly because I didn't know that the interview was going to take place. So the idea that you could stop the clock and have another consultation of the British public is one that seems to me to be profoundly missing from most of the coverage of this issue thus far. Problem is, it depends partly where you're getting your coverage from. If you're getting your coverage from this programme, where you're dealing almost exclusively in facts and statistical evidence, you will still, as many of us are, be wondering what the hell the other lot are up to. But if you're getting your coverage from the Daily Mail or other sort of unicorn promises and deluded dreamers, then you're probably under the impression that you're still going to get your unicorn delivered in March 2019. Puts us in a difficult position with half an hour of the programme remaining. 0345 6060 973. Why just should we do it? Can we do it in a riddle me this kind of way? If the bloke who wrote Article 50 thinks that enacting it is not a good thing, that's the closest to being undiplomatic I could tempt him to be. The bloke who actually wrote it is a crossbench peer in the House of Lords. He's got no flesh in the game. He's got nothing to lose. He wrote Article 50. And he thinks that triggering it is an error. How can I put this in a way that isn't going to make you sort of run away and hide? What makes you think you know better? 0345 6060 973. Let's try and keep it friendly. I have a slight tendency to perhaps over-respect experts. I don't know. Maybe I over-respect mighty intellects and experience when I should go more with instincts and guts. But when the bloke who wrote Article 50 has the courtesy to explain to us in some detail why A, he thinks it's important people register the fact that it can be stopped, and B, that triggering it in the first place was not a good idea, what makes you think you know better? 0345 6060 973. And let's add, because we haven't done this for a while, let's add to the list this question, which is, we now have a fairly clear idea of all the things we're going to lose, okay? Grimsby, very concerned that it's going to lose its fishing industry. That's why they've sent delegations to Parliament begging to be exempted from Brexit. The steel industry, we learnt yesterday, very worried that they're going to lose their ability to sell steel in this country because the government has already signalled that it won't copy European Union caps on what Chinese steel can and can't be sold. So cheap Chinese steel is going to rush into the country. 90% of the seafood processed in Grimsby is imported from the European Union. So even the semblance, even the sniff of a tariff in that field could do for the whole industry. We know that the people who told us we could have a Norway-style agreement were either lying or too ignorant to really understand why we couldn't. So we're getting a longer list of all the things we're going to lose. In the "you lost, get over it" camp, who I desperately reach out to on a daily basis with love and offers of understanding and peace, but in the "you lost, get over it" camp, as this massive pile of things we're going to lose grows, what is it on the things we're going to gain that persuades you that Lord Kerr's advice that we could stop it is unnecessary because you're never going to want to. And so I will suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. I'll deal with all the screamed abuse and the spittle-flecked tweets saying, "We won, get over it, you lost," and all the rudeness. That's fine. It's water off a duck's back. But behind that kind of dawning realisation that's going to make people even angrier than they were before, voted to leave the European Union because I thought it was going to make my life better and immigration lower, or immigrants' lives worse. As it is, it's going to make my life even worse. So I'm going to be even angrier now with the people that warned me not to do it. Behind that, behind that wall, behind that camp, when you hear the man that wrote Article 50 describing in some detail his factual understanding of what that means, and it means something rather different from what some commentators say. So it has been triggered, but it can be stopped at any point. It can also be paused if we decided to have another vote. Why on earth would we have another vote? Well, because so many facts have changed. The people of Grimsby have discovered, for example, that the fishing industry could be decimated by Brexit. The steel industry, most of those communities voted to leave. They've discovered that they could be, well, they will be worse off than they currently are. Cornwall has asked for exemptions. That was a big leave vote. Most of the statistical evidence, most of the research suggests that areas voted to remain, prosperous southeastern areas, will probably come out okay, and areas that voted to leave, which are more likely to be rural and or northern and less wealthy, they're going to come out even worse. So it's going to entrench the divisions that led to the actual result. So two questions. Number one, what are you getting in return for all the stuff that we're losing? I'd love to know. I'd love to actually join in some form of enthusiasm. Yeah, we might be losing this, and this, but we're going to get that. 0345 6060 973. And I really enjoyed talking to him. I suppose it's the nature of the beast, isn't it? Jonathan is in Finchley. Jonathan, what would you like to say?
James, how wonderful that you had Lord Kerr on. I do hope that is going to be put on the website as a podcast for people to listen. It was absolutely fantastic. And, of course, he's completely right, because signing Article 50 was like a decree nisi in a divorce. When a couple signs a decree nisi, if they change their mind, it can simply be torn up before you get the decree absolute. And that is what the signing of Article 50 was. And it can be torn up. And it's increasingly becoming apparent, James, that it should be torn up.
Well, is it, though? Because I'm going to suggest that you didn't think we should have left in the first place. So for it to become increasingly apparent, we'd have to be speaking, and I know that we speak to a few on this programme, but it's not backed up by much polling, the notion that there's been a reversal. And that's what I find so enduringly fascinating. What's on the other side of the scales? What is it that we're going to get that makes losing all this stuff worthwhile?
James, there was a poll, I don't know if you saw it, about 3 weeks ago, there was a poll which showed that if we had the referendum again, Remain would be some 5 percentage points ahead.
Yeah, but do you know what? I look at those polls and think, How can it only be 5? I'm still more fascinated. Exactly. I'm still more fascinated by the 42% than the 47%, who either are utterly unaware of all of the facts that have emerged, or genuinely feel that all of those facts that have emerged can be not only addressed by, but also defeated by the stuff they know that Lord Kerr doesn't, or you don't, and I don't.
James, when we had the referendum, I made a list of genuine reasons why people voted leave, genuine reasons. And it was things like, I can't buy white paint anymore. Yes. And I blame the European Union. I can't get the same dog food as I used to be able to buy, and that's the fault of the European Union. Turkey is about to join the European Union. I mean, I'm not saying that those were typical of every single leave voter, but I collected about 70 or 80 absurd reasons why people voted to leave. Now, you know, and the British economy was the slowest growing economy in the second and third quarters of any European Union economy, any G7 economy. It's becoming increasingly clear, as economists said before the referendum, that this was a bad idea.
And now I'm going to be a little bit devil's advocate here, but I think I respond now by saying, yeah, but where's the recession?
James, it's bad enough having the slowest growing economy.
Yeah, but where's the recession, Ramona?
Well, we said that there might be a recession. We didn't say there would be a recession, and we haven't left yet. Let's see.
Okay, then what about World War III? I don't see World War III starting anytime soon, clever clogs.
Thank you, James. We're dealing with that one. David Cameron never said, if you read the speech, he never said that World War III was going to happen. He simply said that the European Union has been a force for helping the security of the UK. And every single retired head of MI6 says the same thing, apart from one, and he retired 15 years ago. So, every single one of these arguments that there's a response to.
Yes, and I suppose that's why Lord Kerr felt compelled to intervene today, because they're not really arguments, are they? They're sound bites and slogans. The idea that we have to leave, Article 50 can't be reversed, when the bloke that writes it feels that the British media and the British commentariat is so completely bogus now, so corrupt, that the bloke who wrote it feels compelled to come forward and actually clarify what the facts are, because people in my line of work are on a daily basis telling, I don't know whether they're telling lies. I genuinely don't anymore. I got told off by John Rentoul from The Independent yesterday for calling Penny Mordaunt a liar, or whether they're just ignorant. How do you tell the difference? When she said that Turkey was definitely going to join the European Union and that Britain had no power of veto whatsoever, was she lying or was she just being ignorant? I don't know. Do you know?
James, the problem was in the referendum, and we know this from what's been written, we know that the Remain campaign, the Stronger In campaign, was stopped from rebutting the lies of the other side because David Cameron was more concerned with preserving the Conservative Party. He was confident he was going to win it. He was concerned with preserving the Conservative Party, and he didn't want the lies to be rebutted. And as Peter Mandelson said twice, once on television, it's like taking a spoon to a knife fight if you cannot rebut the lies of the other side.
And you couldn't rebut the lies of the other side because a lot of them had been sort of green-lighted, if you will, by not just the Brexit fringe of the Conservative Party, but the whole shebang. A lot of the stuff on immigration that the Home Secretary should have challenged and revealed to be untrue. But of course the Home Secretary didn't do that, because then she would have had to answer the question about why she wasn't addressing some of these issues herself. Jonathan, thank you. 12:46 is the time. I don't know whether I can tempt you to ring me rather than the other 21 hours where the radio station is on air. If you're absolutely convinced you know better than Lord Kerr, just talk me through the whys and the wherefores. 0345 6060973. And if you want to have a crack at telling me now that Grimsby's fishing industry, Wales's steel industry, most of Cornwall, the farmers, all of them queuing up and asking to be spared the impact of Brexit, farmers in particular looking particularly scared, because you've got this bloke from Wetherspoons who's talking about, don't worry about food prices come down, don't worry about food prices going up, when we've got no tariffs and we've got free trade with lots of other countries, we'll be able to bring in loads and loads and loads of really cheap food. Yeah, that's going to really comfort the farmers, isn't it? So what is it that's on the other side of the scales? 12:46 is the time. The former diplomat who drafted Article 50 says the UK could opt to reverse Brexit up to the moment we leave, even if a date for the country's departure from European Union were added to the withdrawal bill, which Theresa May has announced today. There's some confusion about whether or not her insistence that we will leave on the 29th of March 2019 kills off the possibility of a transition period. I'm going to go all in and say, of course it doesn't. Don't be silly. We can leave. Or am I going to go? No, I'm going to join the confusion on this one. But the questions I've got really hinge around evidence and sort of empirical facts. And also the fact that when the facts change, anyone with a brain changes it. Anyone with a mind changes it. There is no point having a mind if you... So all of the things that were... I'm not quite as cynical as our last caller, Jonathan, who's encountered people who voted to leave the European Union because they were under the impression they weren't allowed to buy white paint anymore, although we've had plenty of those on the programme, actually, so I probably should acknowledge that. But the clever stuff, or the stuff that masqueraded as clever, the idea that we would somehow revivify our fishing industry, that ship has sailed, if you'd pardon the pun. The idea that somehow we'd be better off, that ship sailed immediately with the fall in the pound. The idea that exports are going to increase, which they used as a sort of band-aid to cover up the decline in the pound, while not explaining. Same with the FTSE 100. This is where I get cross, where I see how easy it is to fall for this crud. Oh, look, FTSE 100 is doing really well. Yeah, of course the FTSE 100 is doing really well. I think it's between 70 and 80% foreign money in the FTSE 100. So you've effectively, by seeing the pound go down, you've told all these foreign investors they've got to buy one, get one free on shares in British companies. It's utter clownery. But yesterday I genuinely had a moment where I found myself describing Penny Mordaunt as a liar because she insisted severally during the referendum campaign that the UK would not have any veto in the unlikely event of Turkey applying successfully to join the European Union. And that's simply not true. That's Brexit in a nutshell. You now have a British politician who lied demonstrably and definitively, or was too ignorant to understand that she was lying and refused to correct the lie after she'd had it explained to her that she was wrong. She has been promoted into the cabinet. That is the legacy of Brexit. Politicians who have lied to the public or who have allowed their ignorance to infect the public and who have done nothing to reverse that process after being told in no uncertain terms that what they have said is not true, they end up getting promoted. That's what I find astonishing. But anyway, enough from me. We've only got a few minutes left. Morva's in Bury St Edmunds, beautiful part of the world. What would you like to say, Morva?
Hi there, James. James, my question really this morning, having listened to Lord Kerr and your conversation, which is very detailed and very interesting, it's a very simple question, and maybe because it's so simple, nobody's asking it. How do we reconcile, if we stop this process, however we stop it, tear the letter up, whatever, how do we reconcile with what would be a huge democratic deficit for those people who voted leave?
You have another vote.
Well, we've been told that isn't going to happen. So
well, then you've got a problem. Personally, I don't think you can stop it without another vote, and I don't think you should. And I'm not even sure. I mean, I'm not even sure which way the vote would go. Because hand on heart, if it was 52-48 the other way round, I'd feel that was still unfinished business.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, though, I mean, that's almost a luxury that we haven't got yet, because the thing I find utterly baffling, genuinely now, it's reached the point where, apart from you lost, get over it, shut up, I don't know what the arguments are on the other side. I mean, we had a look at Priti Patel and Kwesi Kwarteng and Liam Fox today, on the record explaining why they think British workers have got too many rights, and yet a lot of people who followed their lead and voted for Brexit did so under the impression that they'd end up better protected in the workplace. It's beyond surreal, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, we're on a sort of like a helter-skelter, and we can't stop now. It's almost out of control.
That is why Lord Kerr intervened today, isn't it? Because that lie has taken hold. The notion that we can't stop it now has taken hold, and the Brexit lobby, the furiously unthinking side, or the deeply sinister side of it, who would erode workers' rights, who think that we're too regulated, that workers in this country have got it somehow easy, and to coin the phrase from Kwesi Kwarteng and Priti Patel's book, that they're unbelievably idle. They're desperate for us not to realise we can stop it, because they see all of these pennies dropping and light bulbs coming on across the country, and they want to get the lie out there that we can't stop it. Sorry, even if you think you've made a mistake, you've got no refunds, no income tax, no VAT, no money backs, no guarantee. That's what they're selling now.
Yeah, and I could hear all that and take all that as read as you're saying. There's only one problem we've got that's really serious problem, and that is we have a very, very weak Prime Minister. A very weak Prime Minister, and also lying racists like Farage suggesting that he would he'd put on khaki and pick up a gun if it were to be stopped or reversed. That's why I don't understand how that's not a subject of a criminal investigation myself, Morva. Well, my concern remains is that there's an awful lot of people going to be listening to this today, and they're going to say, I never thought that democracy was for me. They've gone through their entire life, not voted, never registered to vote, not for them. And now they're in a position where they think, I think you're right.
No, I think you're right. And I think that the notion that these people who, for whatever reason it may be, have always felt that they haven't been able to affect anything at all, voted to leave the European Union, had this massive rush of blood to their head with the evidence that actually, yes, we can affect stuff. And even if even if that effect turns out to be enormously negative, even if it turns out to be the biggest act of national self-harm in the history of these islands, it still won't trump that little flicker of feeling like they mattered for a moment.
Yes, for a moment. But now they're going to go back, and they'll probably never vote again.
No.
So
but we mattered for a moment, they'll tell their grandchildren, as we live in a kind of dystopian version of the Hunger Games. We mattered for a moment. There was one point in 2016 where I was allowed to punch myself in the face without feeling stupid. And all right, a year later I started feeling really, really stupid. But the memory of that punch in the face, it was a real moment of political purity.
And now I'm living in a box set. I'm watching the next episode unravel and wondering where it's going to take me. And it's all exciting. Who's going to get on the tumbril next?
Yes.
Who's going to chop?
And they even stand up now. Slowly the truth begins to emerge. British workers are idle. British workers have got too much rights. British workers have got too much protection. But that's what you voted for. I think Morva's probably right, though. I do think that this massive disconnect between the intellectual argument and the emotional argument is an almost insuperable obstacle. It's why I'm nowhere near as optimistic as some people on the Remain side of the argument that sanity will prevail, because also there's the forelock tugging. You know, look at the very, very mediocre intellects with posh accents who seem to be in charge. You know, Ian Duncan Smith, pretty much the only cheerleader that producers could tempt into studios yesterday. A man who is pretty much the worst Conservative leader in living memory, bar possibly Theresa May. And then you've got your Jacob Rees-Mogg, a sort of pantomime idea of what a toff is like. And they are now, especially Rees-Mogg, they're now the ones who the furiously unthinking are doffing their caps to and hugging their forelocks. Because deep down inside, they just want somebody posh to tell them what to do. That's the problem that we face, and that's the problem that I don't think a million interventions from the like of Lord Kerr, who is sincere and evidence-based and honest, and not quite posh enough, despite being in the House of Lords, to persuade the forelock tuggers. Anyway, that's it for another week. We'll do it again Monday morning from 10. The next voice you will hear belongs to Sheila Fogarty.